Senator Kennedy absolutely destroys and humiliates Maxine Waters after she mocks his physical act. You gotta understand something. Senator Kennedy ain't playing games. Okay? Not playing games one bit. And you're gonna learn that we Republicans are done playing bullshit with them. Seriously, we're done. So let's go ahead and get into the video, alright?
Told Senator Kennedy to spare her the folksy act, and she said it to the face of a man who had just spent a weekend measuring the distance between power and poverty with the patience of a farmer counting feed sacks. His friend Boudreaux walked 200 steps every morning to feed catfish in Breaux Bridge, Louisiana, while Waters sat behind the walls of a $6 million Hancock Park mansion, 3 minutes by car from a district where 161,000 people lived below the poverty line. 3 minutes by car sounds small until you understand what it means in politics. It can be the distance between a front gate and a forgotten neighborhood, between an indoor swimming pool and a child on free lunch, between public service as a slogan and public service as an actual duty. Waters wanted to make the hearing about Kennedy's delivery, his accent, his timing, his Louisiana stories, the little bayou rhythm she thought she could swat away like a fly before the cameras warmed up. Kennedy let her do it because sometimes the easiest way to expose arrogance is to let it stand in the room long enough to believe it is safe. June 18, 2025, room 2128, Rayburn House Office Building, the House Financial Services Committee had convened a hearing on banking oversight and consumer protection. This was not supposed to become a public audit of Maxine Waters, at least not in her mind, because this was her terrain, her committee culture, her microphone, her preferred battlefield, the kind of room where she had chaired, co-chaired, dominated, interrupted, scolded, reclaimed, and performed authority for the better part of 2 decades. Waters sat in the ranking member's chair with the posture of someone who had mistaken longevity for immunity and seniority for moral cover. Her glasses were on, her expression fixed, her body language carrying that familiar congressional message: I have been here longer than you, so I get to decide what is serious and what is theater. Across from her, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana sat at the witness table in a seersucker suit, tie slightly off center, legal pad open, manila folder beside it, thin enough to look harmless and dangerous enough because thin folders usually mean someone removed everything except the blade. Waters opened without warmth, without even the ceremonial courtesy that usually dresses up a public humiliation before it begins. Senator Kennedy, she said, shaping his name like a verdict already reached, I did not invite you here to perform your little comedy routine for the cameras. She told him this was serious banking oversight, not a stand-up special from the Bayou, and the sentence landed exactly the way she intended it to land, as a dismissal wrapped in institutional language. She was not just talking to Kennedy, she was talking past him, toward her colleagues, toward the staff, toward the cameras, toward every person in the room who understood that in Washington, ridicule works best when the room is invited to participate. If he had substantive testimony on consumer protection, she told him to deliver it, and if he was there to tell jokes about his friend Boudreaux, then some comedy club on K Street would be happy to have him. Then came the Waters pause, not a dramatic pause, not an artistic pause, but the pause of someone accustomed to controlling the oxygen in a hearing room. It was the pause that says the next sentence will arrive when I permit it, not when the facts require it. She reminded Kennedy that she had spent 35 years fighting for communities abandoned by banks, fighting for black home ownership, fighting against redlining, fighting against predatory lending, and she said it with the confidence of someone who expected the resume itself to end the argument. Then she told him to spare her the folksy act, and that was the real opening mistake, because she treated Kennedy's style like a costume instead of a delivery system. She thought the accent was the weapon, when the weapon was the folder. The room waited for the familiar Kennedy routine, the soft smile, the slow cleaning of the glasses, the Budrow story, the line that would make the gallery chuckle, and then the return to business as usual. That was the script everyone expected because Kennedy had trained Washington to underestimate the blade by polishing the handle. Comic relief is tolerated in official rooms because comic relief is not supposed to change the plot, and Waters clearly believed he was there to decorate the hearing with Bayou color before the serious people resumed their serious work. Kennedy pulled his glasses from his breast pocket and cleaned them slowly, not nervously, not theatrically, but with the calm of a man arranging the last items on a table before surgery. Then he put them on, opened the manila folder, looked at Waters, and said he appreciated the career summary, because 35 years was impressive, a long time to represent the same district, and also a long time for nothing to change. That was the first shift in the room, small but unmistakable, the kind of shift that does not show up in a transcript, but shows up on faces. Waters' eyes narrowed by a fraction, not enough for a headline, but enough for anyone watching closely to know that she understood this was no longer the routine she had mocked. Kennedy said he wanted to walk her through what 35 years looked like by the numbers, and that phrase mattered because numbers do not care how long someone has held a gavel. Numbers do not applaud speeches, numbers do not wear campaign buttons, numbers do not care about seniority, slogans, committee rank, cable news reputation, or whether a line became a t-shirt. Numbers sit there, cold and rude, waiting for somebody to read them out loud. He started with what he called something light, and the word light was almost cruel because the room could already feel the weight behind it. He pointed to the Maxine Waters Employment Preparation Center, named after her, funded through an earmark she requested, and he reminded the room that Citizens Against Government Waste had named her Porker of the Month in June 2009 over that very matter. He also noted that Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington had placed her on its most corrupt members of Congress list for the 5th time, but he made clear those were opinions, and opinions were not what he wanted to lean on. Kennedy preferred numbers because numbers are harder to interrupt than insults and harder to laugh away than jokes. So he moved to the Department of Labor data and said that in 2024, the Maxine Waters Employment Preparation Center reported 340 program graduates. 340 sounded respectable for about 1 second, until Kennedy read the next line and turned the number into an indictment. The 6-month job placement rate was 11 individuals, 11 out of 340, a success rate so small it did not need a dramatic soundtrack because the math itself was humiliating enough. He let the number sit because sometimes silence after a number is more damaging than any adjective attached to it. Then he brought in Budrow, the catfish farmer from Breaux Bridge, the man Waters thought was just a punchline waiting to be dismissed. Budrow stocked 200 fingerlings every spring, Kennedy said, and 94% survived, meaning 188 out of 200 fish made it from fingerling to full-grown, frying-pan-ready catfish. That was when Kennedy delivered the comparison that turned the hearing from oversight into exposure. Budrow's catfish, he said, had a better success rate than Waters Employment Center, and the line landed because it was funny for exactly half a second before it became brutal. The room laughed, but the laughter had teeth in it because everyone understood the joke was not about fish. It was about a building with her name on it producing 11 job placements out of 340 graduates, while a man with a pond, feed bags, and no federal monument to himself produced better outcomes with catfish. Kennedy cleaned his glasses the first time, and the room began learning the rhythm. Joke, number, silence, wound. He continued with Budrow because the point was not to make Louisiana sound quaint. The point was to make Washington sound ridiculous. Budrow did not have a building named after him, Kennedy said, did not have a sign on the road announcing some grand aquaculture excellence center, did not turn his pond into a monument to himself, and did not demand applause for doing the basic work. His wife Marie called it that hole in the yard, which somehow carried more honesty than half the names on federally funded buildings across America. Boudreaux woke up early, hauled feed bags, checked water temperature, pulled dead fish out before they poisoned the live ones, and produced results without a ribbon-cutting ceremony or a press release. Waters had her name on a wall attached to a 3.2% success rate, while Boudreaux's name was in 188 surviving catfish, and Kennedy left the audience to decide which one looked more like employment preparation. A ripple of laughter moved through the gallery, the kind that begins as amusement and then realizes it has stumbled into evidence. Waters laughed too, but not with the room, not in the warm way of someone enjoying a joke at her own expense. Hers was the short, sharp laugh of a politician who had survived ethics inquiries, censure attempts, corruption lists, and years of public controversy, and believed this was just another passing performance from another man who underestimated her. That laugh said she had heard worse, beaten louder, outlasted more dangerous critics, and did not intend to let a senator in a seersucker suit make her blink. She would remember that laugh later, because it marked the last moment in the hearing when she still thought Kennedy had only brought comedy. Kennedy turned the page, and the sound of paper moving inside that thin folder suddenly felt louder than it should have. The gallery was still carrying the aftertaste of the catfish line, still smiling at the image of Boudreaux's pond outperforming a federally blessed employment center, but Kennedy's face had already moved somewhere else. He was not smiling, not leaning into the joke, not milking the room, because the joke had done its job and now the numbers were coming in colder. Waters watched him with the expression of someone who had expected an entertainer and was beginning to recognize an accountant with a knife. Then Kennedy said they should talk about addresses, specifically hers, and the hearing room lost whatever softness was left. He read from the folder that Waters' primary residence sat in Hancock Park, one of the polished Los Angeles neighborhoods where wealth does not announce itself with noise because the gates already speak. Approximate value, $6 million, 6,000 square feet, indoor swimming pool, wrought iron gates on the front doors, gates on the driveways, gates on the patios, manicured landscaping kept clean by professionals, because even the hedges seemed to have better representation than parts of her district. He named the surrounding world carefully, the neighbors, the oil money history, the kind of old Los Angeles wealth that wears privacy like armor. Then he turned the page and shifted the camera 3 minutes away, from Hancock Park into California's 43rd Congressional District, from mansion glass to barred windows, from trimmed hedges to cracked sidewalks, from private gates to public failure, different neighborhood, different world, same elected representative. Kennedy read the numbers slowly, not like a man trying to impress the room, but like a doctor reading test results nobody wants to hear. Poverty rate, 27%. 1 in 3 children below the poverty line. 161,000 people living in poverty. Bars on windows that were not decorative wrought iron, but survival hardware. The kind that says the neighborhood is dangerous and leaving it costs more than staying afraid. Violent crime above the national average, black homeownership declining for the past decade, and the scars of the 1992 riots still visible in buildings, in census data, and in the quiet exhaustion of a community that had been promised rescue so many times, the promise itself had become part of the damage. Waters had called those riots a rebellion, but Kennedy treated the aftermath as a ledger. 63 dead, 33 years later, the district still carrying the bill. He looked up and said what the map already said. Her mansion was not in the district she represented. It used to be, then redistricting moved the line, but Kennedy's point was not legal residency trivia. His point was proximity without responsibility, closeness without presence. 3 minutes by car from a $6 million mansion with an indoor pool to neighborhoods where children qualified for free lunch and families lived behind bars that did not match the architecture. 3 minutes was not a commute. It was an indictment. 3 minutes was less than the time it takes to walk through a supermarket checkout line, less than the time it takes a politician to record a fundraising video, less than the time it takes to perform concern in front of a camera. And yet, in Kennedy's telling, those 3 minutes had stretched into a lifetime because choice can make a short distance morally enormous. Then he moved into the tax records because the folder was not interested in stopping at appearances. Kennedy said Waters claimed a California homeowner's exemption on the Hancock Park mansion, reducing her property taxes by approximately $7,000 per year, while also benefiting from a District of Columbia residence classification on her Washington apartment. 2 homes, 2 tax benefits, 2 jurisdictions, and 1 pattern that started to sound less like paperwork and more like a way of living inside every loophole available to power. He mentioned Senator Schiff being under investigation for a similar kind of dual residence arrangement, not to make a dramatic comparison, he said, but because the pattern was becoming familiar. That was the Kennedy method in its cleanest form. State the number, deny the flourish, let the implication do the violence. Then Boudreaux returned, but not as comic relief anymore. Boudreaux lived in Breaux Bridge, Louisiana, population 8,000, in a house 200 steps from his catfish pond, and he knew the exact number because he counted it every morning, like a man who understood that responsibility has a route and he walked it. Out the back door, down the dirt path, past the pecan tree, around the shed to the water, feed the fish, check the level, pull out what had died before it poisoned what still lived, then 200 steps back, rain or heat, January or August. Boudreaux lived with his fish, and Kennedy made that ordinary fact sound more honorable than any committee title in the room. Then he looked at Waters and drew the contrast so tightly there was no room to hide inside biography. Waters lived 3 minutes by car from her district, Kennedy said, but she did not walk those 3 minutes, did not drive those 3 minutes in the way representation requires, did not live with the consequences of the numbers she claimed to fight. She drove past them on the way to LAX, on the way to Washington, on the way to Minnesota, on the way to tell other people's constituents to get more confrontational, while her own constituents remained 3 minutes from her gate and a lifetime from her swimming pool. Boudreaux walked 200 steps every morning to feed catfish. Waters would not walk 200 steps to see the people who elected her. The sentence landed harder than the catfish line because there was no joke left inside it. The first laugh had been easy, but this silence was heavier because it asked the room to picture the distance and then admit the distance was deliberate. The gallery stopped laughing. Waters stopped laughing too, but the change on her face was more revealing than any objection she could have made. The earlier sharp laugh disappeared, replaced by pressed lips and a smaller expression, not the public fight face she put on for cameras, not the righteous combat posture that said she was ready to take on the room. This was calculation, not outrage. The face of someone hearing a line of attack developed faster than she could cut it off without making the cutoff look like fear. Her right hand moved toward the gavel, touched it, but did not lift it. That tiny gesture said more than a full speech. The gavel was there, close enough to strike, close enough to impose order, close enough to remind everyone that institutional authority still sat within reach. But touching the gavel without using it is not control. It is the body asking permission to escape while the mind still worries about optics. If she struck it too early, she would confirm the damage. If she did not strike it, Kennedy would keep reading. Kennedy kept reading. He said they should talk about her daughter, Karen Waters. And at that moment, Waters' jaw tightened in a way that told the room the next subject was not abstract policy anymore. Campaign finance can be dressed in technical language, buried under compliance terms, protected by consultants, softened by explanations about outreach, slate mailers, endorsement operations, and voter education. But once the word daughter enters the hearing room, the issue stops floating above the table and lands inside the family ledger. Kennedy knew it, Waters knew it, and the room knew it before the next number even arrived. Since 2003, Kennedy said, Waters' campaign committee, Citizens for Waters, had paid Karen Waters and her company, Progressive Connections, a total of $1.2 million for Slate mailer management fees. In the 2021 to 2022 cycle alone, he said, the payments reached $192,000, and the FEC had fined the committee $68,000 that year for related violations. But Kennedy was not satisfied with the headline number, because $1.2 million is large enough to shock people and vague enough for defenders to smother it under process. So he moved to the product itself,